Bagan is a plain in the middle of Myanmar, covering a tract of country measuring about 40 square kilometers along the east bank of Irrawaddy River. The monuments, which are now in all stages of decay, were erected mostly from 11th to 13th centuries AD, when these territories were the seat of Bagan dynasty. Tradition carried by the local chronicles has it that a long line of 55 kings ruled over this kingdom during the 12th century. The authentic history of the dynasty, as supported by epigraphic evidence, begins with the reign of King Anvarata 1044–1077 AD. In 1057, Anvarata conquered Mon's kingdom of Taton and brought back to his capital the Theravada scriptures in Pali, a large number of Buddhist monks, artists and craftsmen of every description. From this momentous date, that there began an extraordinary architectural and artistic activity, which in little more than 2 centuries covered the city in its surroundings, with thousands of splendid monuments of every shape and size. The square temples dominated by Mon influence are distinguished by their dark corridors, which are dimly lighted by perforated windows, and the bright frescoes of variegated color with Mon writings on the walls. The typical Bagan-style temples are bright and airy within, with imposing plan and height, but there are also some temples with intermediate forms. The end of 13th century witnessed the fall of Bagan dynasty. Thousands of pagodas were despoiled by the invaders and Vandals, and the king who fled from the Chinese is believed to have dismantled a considerable number of the monuments to collect materials for building forts. Mingalaja was the very last of the large late-period monuments to be built before the kingdom's decline, thus representing the final flowering of the Bagan's architectural skills. It took 6 whole years to complete the construction of this great monument. Mingalaja is noted for its fine proportions and for many beautiful glazed Jataka tiles around its 3 square terraces. The smaller square building made of brick in the Jadi grounds is one of a few libraries of early Buddhist sacred texts Tipitaka. Most were constructed of wood, like monasteries, and were destroyed by fire long ago. I stood at the entrance of one of the thousands of ancient Bagan temples. Ancient Bagan was the kingdom of Burma's empire that had been existed from the 9th century Christ era till 1287, as I can remind, when Bengal invaders destroyed the whole empire and Bagan became in decline. Later, the territory of Bagan kingdom been divided into the few different states, and one of the most prosperous states was the Mon state. The history of ancient Burma's empire divided into few periods, and Bagan period probably the most successful, the most bright and famous, when the king Anvrat unified the country and invented Theravada Buddhism and the unified confession for the whole of his state. So since that time many southern temples have been erected, and it symbolized prosperity and might of this ancient kingdom. In the relatively smaller territory of 42 square kilometers, as legend told us, been concentrated 13,000 temples. But till nowadays survived about 2,000 and odd, the exact quantity of structures. estimation of this quantity is different from one information source to another. From 2200 to 2500, I guess nobody knows exactly how many temples survived. Some of these temples are relatively big, like Ananda temple, probably the most famous in the whole ensemble. Some are relatively smaller and not really so gorgeous, just a simple Buddhist stupas. Many of temples been rebuilt and reconstructed. That's why Bagan earned the status of World UNESCO Heritage Site relatively not long time ago.
Gan Temple, a good example of one of the many relatively well-preserved Bagan temples, which history is known very little. It had a square-type base and a small stupa on the top of it. Inside the main hall, a large sitting Buddha image facing east. The walls are decorated with floral paintings on the sides and on the ceiling, such as bodhi tree, lotus roses, circle patterns, and ogre heads and figures. At the entrance hall have been found graffiti. Horoscopes date back to 1294 to 1380 AD. Construction of Gawdawpalin Pater, mean temple, began during the reign of King Sithu II, 1138 to 1211. During his reign, Pagan Empire reached its peak and will decline gradually after his death. It was a short transitional period of Bagan history, when its art and architecture drew all influences, were the more pure Indian, and began to establish a clear idiom of its own. Two great temples date from the reign of Sithu II, Sulamani and Gawdawpalin. In these, the Burmese architect explored the possibilities of heightened elevation with upper levels and shrines. The hollow Gu-style temple is a structure used for meditation, devotional worship of Lord Buddha, and conduct other Buddhist rituals. Primarily, the inner walls and the vaults of the temple were covered with frescoes, which have not survived to present times, since in later era these frescoes were painted over with lime. At the same time, temples' interiors become lighter and loftier. Structural techniques used in large relieving architectural devices enable more daring expressions of this craving for height and majesty that has been described as aspiration. Gawdawpalin is the second tallest temple in the whole Bagan architectural ensemble.